The absolute scariest thing about enmeshment is that if you don't ever make it out of it, if you don't ever really heal from it, you don't really get to establish and develop your own sense of autonomous self. Let's look at enmeshment and better understand what it is before we further dive into this video. Enmeshment is basically a system where everyone is enmeshed. And I understand that for a lot of people this would look probably normal or all right. But the reality is, with enmeshment comes a lack of and diffused boundaries. Everyone's shit is everyone's shit. Everyone knows about each other's personal life, even the darkest and deepest stuff. And quite oftentimes, each person's stuff is talked about regularly because people lack healthy boundaries. That's the whole foundation of enmeshment. That's why enmeshment is so unhealthy and fucked up. People lack healthy boundaries. But let's also talk about losing yourself amongst a system, a family system of enmeshment. When you are raised in a system of enmeshment, you don't really develop yourself. You develop a person that is very much intertwined into other people. You end up being codependent. You end up attracting relationships that are exceedingly fucked up and unhealthy. You end up with a lack of healthy boundaries, and with that, a lack of healthy relationships. Yesterday I made a video that was talking about the reality of how emotionally immature, emotionally unhealthy people, they have a really hard time with, one, saying no, and two, knowing when the fuck to stop. Stop doing something. Stop going any further into something with somebody that is probably going to be unhealthy. And because of that, they end up in exceedingly fucked up, toxic, and unhealthy situations with people because emotionally, they just go past or I should do it this way, they just go past the redlining and they just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Yeah, boundaries are essential. They are. And a lot of people don't really understand this because they were raised in systems where boundaries were not put in place. Boundaries just didn't exist, and you just went and went and went and went. You pushed as far as you could, and even with that, like, into other people. And when I say that, what I mean is relationships, healthy relationships, consist of healthy boundaries. Relationships and systems of enmeshment do not. So therefore, you're more likely to push further and further and further and further into somebody else's shit. And it's just simply not healthy. But when you are raised in a system of enmeshment and you do not develop a healthy sense of self, and when I say that, what I mean is because you're being raised in a system that lacks healthy boundaries, your ego state is not developing healthy boundaries. Let's look back at Freudian psychology, psychoanalytic theory, the id, the ego, and the superego. The ego state, a healthy ego state that develops into adolescence and adulthood and, the higher stages of life. A healthy ego state consists of healthy boundaries. When you are raised in a system of enmeshment, you do not get the healthy boundaries, so therefore you do not reach adulthood in a healthy way. And with that, you likely attract relationships that are very much the same enmeshed, intermingled, tangled, intertwined bullshit. And then what happens? You lose self. But you never really gained self because you never really developed a healthy sense of self. You really can't. When you're raised in enmeshment, you do not develop a healthy sense of self. And so that's the thing, like, imagine this is a healthy sense of self right here. Imagine this is an unhealthy sense of self. When you're an unhealthy sense of self, a fucked up ego state with a bunch of enmeshment trauma, you are then seeking and attracted to other unhealthier sense of selves. And then you just start to do the thing and you just end up enmeshed with other people. That's the reality of it. But what do you miss out on? Well, it's really what you never had because you weren't raised with it. But that is a healthy sense of self. This is what the entire video is about. The loss of self in a family system that is enmeshed. So you essentially just never discover yourself. And let me make it very clear that when you're raised in a system of enmeshment and you don't know what enmeshment is, man, you don't know what it is that you're missing out on because it wasn't presented to you. Like, nobody came up to you and was like, hey, would you like to develop as an autonomous individual? No. That's not what happened at all. What happened was a bunch of enmeshed trauma with a bunch of anxious attachment, a bunch of avoidant attachment, a bunch of insecure attachment, a bunch of fucked up attachment that led you to be attracted to people that fit perfectly into your puzzle piece of codependency, fit perfectly into your puzzle piece of anxiety. You might be attracted to people that make you feel, well, I don't like to say that anybody makes anybody feel a certain way, but somebody brings stress and drama and chaos, and guess what? You get anxious. You get depressed. But that's familiar to you, as repetition compulsion shows us, is that we seek out the familiar emotional dynamics of childhood in adulthood. It's wild to me how this entire thing is designed to keep people away from healing. And not only that, but so many people are led to believe that they have something other than what it is that they have. All these fucking fancy labels that distract people from the real issue. All of these people that have their symptoms treated rather than getting to the root cause. You'd be amazed to find out that what you think the issue is actually not it. You may have been gaslighted your entire fucking life, and that may just be a theme that continues in and of itself. So on and so forth. But the reality is, when you're raised in a system of enmeshment, you do not get to develop a healthy ego state with healthy boundaries. No, you're very much enmeshed. So you lose self, because self becomes enmeshed with other. And you lose self. You do not really get to have self. You're just this. This is it. This is how your relationships look with other people. This is healthy. Autonomous. This is enmeshed. That's the difference. Their shit is your shit, and your shit is their shit. And that feels safe. That feels like intimacy. That feels comfortable for a lot of people. If there's one thing that it is absolutely not, it is not healthy. I couldn't imagine living life for years and years, being in relationships with people where I lose myself because I'm enmeshed with them. That's not fun. It's not healthy. What you unknowingly sacrifice is your autonomous self. This cool thing right here that could have developed that would also have healthy relationships with other autonomous selves. You guys would be able to interact. You'd be able to do everything in a healthy way. And you wouldn't feel like you had to know absolutely everything about the person to be intimate with them. You would allow them to be themselves. They would allow you to be yourself. That's the difference.